Greetings. I hope all are well. We're going to discuss how to do our second programming project. Recall we've already discussed this in class. It's going to be just like the first programming assignment. The only difference is the underlying index structure is going to change. So the big issue here is what you're going to need to implement is a doubly linked list. You need to implement a double-ended doubly linked sorted list. Okay, so we've talked about all of these in class before. Remember what this means. Double-ended means that there are two references to the list. There's something called front, which points to the front of the list. There is something called back, which points at the last element in the list. So it would be over there like that. Doubly linked means that each node actually has two reference variables in it. One if it's called prev, one if it's called next, so that this would point that way and this would point that way. Sorted means that we're going to be sorting it by the key value, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So we're basically going to have some sort of structure that looks like this. We imagine here that we have a linked list, or we have one of these structures here with three elements in it that would look like this. So this would point to null. This would point here like that. This would point to null. This would be front. Over here we would have another element called back. And back would point way over to the last element there. So, okay, let's review. This is double-ended because we have a reference to the front and a reference to the back. It is doubly linked because each node has two reference variables in it, a forward pointer and a backward pointer. And we're going to want this to be sorted. So for example, we might imagine if there were names in here, here might be Al, and over here would be Joe, and over here might be Sue. So this is a list that is also sorted. So it's this type of structure that we are going to want to maintain for our indexes. And in fact, what's going to happen is we're going to have three of these. There's going to be one for the ID, there's going to be one for the first name, there's going to be one for the second name. Now, what is each node going to look like? Well, each node, we'll draw a big picture of it right here. So there's going to be a reference over here, and this is prev. There's going to be a reference over here, and this is going to be next. And this is actually going to be split in half. And what's going to be over here is something called key. And key is a string. And over here, there is going to be a variable called where. And where is an int. So this is the node structure that we will be using in our next program. Okay, so let's see if we can explain how our program is going to work. Now we're still going to have the same database structure over here, this big array It's going to look like this. And it's going to be made up of database records. And it's going to be made up of 3 fields. And we can imagine that there is a first name. We can imagine that there's a last name. And we can imagine that there's an ID. And goes something like that. And we keep some reference over here, some reference variable like this that might be called next. That's initialized to 0. This is telling us where to put the next one in here. And then we can imagine that there are going to be 3 indexes. And one of them is, we'll call the first one Findex, for the first name index. And Findex initially is going to have a front and a back. A front and a back. And then there's going to be a last index, so we'll call it Lindex. And that's going to have a front and a back. And then there's going to be an I index. So we'll have I index. And that's going to have a front. And there's going to be a back. And initially, these guys are all pointing to null. Just like that. And I come along and I decide that I want to insert, let's see, I am going to insert somebody. I've got the name over here. The first name is going to be Gabriel. And the last name is Ninda, and that's N-H-I-N-D-A. And Gabriel has an ID number of 6,000. Now, what's going to happen after I do that, I'm going to change that to a 1. And I'm also going to change all of these references down here because these are no longer null. And I get to play with my cool little eraser here. Please be patient. Okay, and I go back over here. So now in my first name, I'm going to have something that looks like this. And it's going to be Gabriel. And Gabriel's at record number 0. And this will be null. And this part over here will also be null. And the back pointer is also pointing up here. Okay, and I come over here, and over here I'm going to have a node that looks like the following. Is going to be Ninda. And that is at 0. And that points to null. And that points to null. And that points over here. And this points at the end. A little bit of a messy drawing here. And then I come over here, and I am going to have another node over here. That is going to have a 6,000 here, 60,000, and again a 0 here. This points to null, this points to null, and this points to the front, and this points to the back, just like that. So that's what this looks like after our first insertion. So now I come along and I want to insert another individual. So it's going to be Anton Limbo. and Anton has an ID of 5,000 or 50,000. Sorry about that. So what I need a little more space here now to draw what's going to happen. And of course, next now would get incremented to 2. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to redraw some of these indexes for you. So what happens is in this findex, okay, well what I need to do is I need to insert Anton here. Now Anton will come before Gabriel, so when I'm done with insertion, the front, here's F, and that's going to point to, here's Anton, and Anton is at record number 1. And this is going to point over here. Whoops, that's a mistake. Excuse me. This will point back here, like that. Gabriel was at record number 0. This will point to null. And my back pointer here will point like that. So you can see that the F index has gone originally from this to this one over here. Okay, now what I am going to do, let's see if I have the capability to do this for you. I'm going to come over here, new, I'm going to say OK, and what I want to do is I want to talk about what's going to happen over here on the L index. So here's L index. And the last name index, let's see, we just inserted the last name was Limbo, L-I-M-B-O. So that's going to come, let's see, L-M-N. That's going to come before Ninda 2. So I have F here, and that is going to point at Limbo with a number 1. This is going to point to null. This is going to point over to the second one here. This is going to be Ninda, N-H-I-N-D-A, and that's at record number 1. This will point back this way. This points to null, and there's a back pointer here that goes like that. So the L index, the last name index, has gone from this to this, and I hope that that's clear. And then the last thing I need to do is update the I index. So the I index, okay, I'm going to have a front. And let's see, I have to insert a 5,000. So I'm going to have a 5,000, 50,000. I keep missing a point there. And that's going to be at record number, oh, I'm sorry. That is a mistake. That should be at 1. Null. This points at the next one. I'm going to run out of space here. This one points back. This one is going to be 60,000. A 0. A null. Here's my back pointer. And it looks like that. So I went from this index over here to this index over here. And finally, I want to say, let's insert one more person, and I'm going to insert Anna Shipepi. And Anna has an ID number of 55123. So what I want to do here, let's see, I probably should have new. Let's take a look at what each one of the indexes would look like. And we can figure it out just by looking at these things over here. So if I look at Findex, okay, the front pointer is going to look like the following. First, I'm going to have Anna, and Anna's at record number 2. This will look like this. Over here I have Anton at 1. And over here I have Gabriel. And Gabriel is at 0. That points to null. And my back pointer points like that. So we'll notice a couple of things. I'm not going to do it for the last index or the ID index. I think you get the idea. But notice a few things. I've maintained this in alpha order, Anna, then Anton, then Gabriel. If I want to print out my database in first name order ascending, I would come over to Findex. I would follow the front pointer. Okay, I would come over here, and this would say, go print out the second record. Then this, I'd come over to the next node. It would say, then print out the first record. This would come over here and say, print out the 0th record. If I wanted to print it out in first name order descending, I would come over here and follow the back pointer. And I would first print out the 0th record, and then I'd follow the pointers to the left. I would print out the first record, then I'd print out the second record. I think you can see that this is, again, probably a very good situation for using iterators. And you're going to have the same idea for doing things by last name or by ID order. I hope this explains how to approach your second assignment. Good parts of the code are going to remain the same, but all of the things referring to the index, of course, are going to change to implement this kind of data structure.